Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York. For those of you not familiar with the organization, we were founded in 1785 by 22 tradesmen, and at that initial meeting, we had a blacksmith, a silversmith, a tailor, and some 228 years later, we are so happy to support this tribute to the art of craftsmanship that is now in its fourth season. For those of you who do not know about the organization, our principal mission is to run our tuition-free school for people in building and construction, and to operate this library, which is one of the 3 remaining private libraries, and also to put forth this 176-year-old lecture series, of which the Artisan series is a part. We are grateful to our sponsors for the Artisan series lecture, which is the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, Ferguson and Shamamamian Architects, John B. Murray Architects, the McQuestion Companies, Peter Panoia Architects, and John B. Murray. So we thank you for your support, and I'd like to introduce Camille Wiard, who is the curator of the series. Thank you.
My name is Camille Wiard, and as curator of this Artisan Lecture Series, it is my greatest pleasure to welcome you this evening. We host these lectures monthly, and I think you should find on your seats this complete schedule of events as well as in the back. But feel free to ask either Victoria or I, and we'll be happy to give you the rest of the events that will be going until June. Who is an artisan? An artisan is a person or company that makes high quality, distinctive products in small quantities, usually by hand and using traditional methods. As Montaigne put it, a French writer from the Renaissance, 16th century, I have seen during my time 100 artisans, wiser and happier than the directors of universities. So without further ado, it is my greatest pleasure to introduce you this evening to Robert Baird. For over 30 years, Robert and his team have been actively involved in the preservation movement, restoring and manufacturing metal ornaments of architectural treasures in the United States and abroad. In addition, Robert will share with you more contemporary work based on his knowledge of traditional craftsmanship. Robert is also the president of the Utah chapter of the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art. We kindly ask you to hold your questions to the end, and Robert will also be with us for the cocktail reception that follows this lecture, and to which we invite you all to attend. Thank you.
I've got my technical assistant here. It's a real pleasure to be able to be with you this evening, and an honor to be able to be here in this beautiful space, but also to be amongst friends. Mechanics and tradesmen are my people. We're going to have some fun tonight. I hope that I can share my message and that you'll understand where I come from and the great relationship that has been established by my family, my ancestors, and the posterity that I leave behind. There's something amazing about being a craftsman. I believe in a creator who created this earth. And I believe within each one of us, we have the innate ability to aspire to that creation, just like He who created us. And that the highest gift is to be able to use our hands and to use our minds to be able to create amazing pieces of artistry, craftsmanship, metalwork, whatever it may be, whatever trade or whatever skill it is. In that creative process, we achieve a level of satisfaction that carries us through the daily trials that come living in this earthly existence. Now, I have one of my dearest friends here, John Weart, who is a master craftsman who has dedicated his life as well, just like me, to working with metal. His expertise is a little bit different than mine, but my love and respect for him runs deep, and I am honored to be able to share my message in his presence. In Malachi, in the end of the Old Testament, there is a statement, and it says, "And he shall turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers." Now, I come from a long heritage of pioneer ancestors that walked across the United States and established our home in the Rocky Mountains. I am keenly aware of what my lineage is, where they came from, and where I fit into that plan of a family. Today, I want to talk about something that's I've discovered over the course of the last 40 years, and it has to do with the red thread principle. Now, the way that this principle works, and what I feel is that every one of us are connected. We are related in some way. And as we go through our lives, we have individual experiences that tie us to somebody else. And when those connections are made, miracles happen. I just came from Utah, and I want to share with you a little miracle. A year ago, I had an idea. The idea was to invite the finest artisans and craftsmen and architects and designers to come to Salt Lake City. Do you know how far that is away from everything? And it's the middle of the winter. But as I started to make calls, people began to say, yes, we want to participate. And as that program came together and as it was realized this last week, it truly was a red thread. There were miracles that brought all of us together. And there are those that are in this audience that experienced that conference and what happened there. That was the red thread principle. Now, as I look at my heritage and I look at where I come from, this is an image of my father, a young boy on an Arabian horse. He was raised in Utah. And as he grew up in high school, he had a passion for classical architecture. I actually have a report that he wrote when he was in 11th grade, 55 pages typed with images of cathedrals from all over Europe. That report today says to me that my father had a passion. I don't know if I could type 55 pages. I know I couldn't. In those days, if you made a mistake, you had to start again. But my father's passion in architecture led him to apply for a scholarship at Columbia University. And he got accepted to go to Columbia University, but at the same time, he received a call from a Mormon prophet to go on a mission to France. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about a red thread and this experience that he had in France. In his missionary service, he traveled all over in 1948-49. It was right after the war. France was in a terrible state of disrepair. My father almost starved to death. he had an amazing experience. But in one of the areas that he served in, he became close friends with the landlord. And I think she took pity on those Mormon missionaries. They were skinny. They didn't eat well. And she would frequently bring them baked goods. Before he left that community, this woman found out that my father loved architecture. And it just so turned out that her father was trained at the École des Beaux-Arts. His name was Andriette. And she had no posterity, and so she gave to my father her father's entire portfolio. A portfolio of drawings, renderings, illustrations, over 140 images. And amongst that collection is an original drawing of the renovation of the Opéra Comique in Paris that was done in 1893. So here's a little Mormon missionary from Utah in France with this collection of incredible drawings and renderings. He brought it back to the United States, and he looked at it, he studied it. He had lost his scholarship to Columbia University. And so he went to the University of Utah to study architecture. And in the beginning, he had a passion for Frank Lloyd Wright. And he thought, I would love to be a modernist. And so he studied Frank Lloyd Wright. And in the study of Frank Lloyd Wright, Frank Lloyd Wright came to Utah. And my father met Frank Lloyd Wright because one of his apprentices was the dean of the School of Architecture in Utah. Well, I don't know how many of you know anything about Frank Lloyd Wright, but Frank Lloyd Wright was pretty high-minded. He had his own ideas. And it was apparent to him that the architecture school at the University of Utah was not sufficient. And he criticized that school. And that changed my father's impression, which connected him to another red thread. My father, studying architecture, had the opportunity to become an architect for the Mormon Church. And he was asked to start construction of Mormon churches all over Europe. And we moved our family to Europe. And we were there for 6 years. And then when we came back to the United States, another red thread connection happened. My father was asked to restore a historic village in the Midwest of the United States, right on the banks of the Mississippi. It happened to be the community that all of the Mormons lived in before they were driven from Illinois and traveled across the plains to Salt Lake City. So for 30 years, my father was the architect for this historic restoration. Now, as a young man, you can look at this image. I'm the little fat guy right behind the wheel there. And as a young boy, I worked with archaeologists every summer. I had the opportunity to excavate historical buildings. I had the special privilege, because I was small, to be lowered down into a bucket, into a well or a cistern that was being excavated, and I got to discover treasures. I got my hands on history. During the course of that restoration, this blacksmith shop was completely restored by my father. So as a young man, I had the opportunity to go into that blacksmith shop. Now, anybody that has put their hand to metal and fire is transfixed. Just ask John. It'll change your life. I spent many days over the course of the summers in this blacksmith shop and had an amazing experience there. Little did I know that metal would play a powerful role in my future. We left Nauvoo. We were there for about 4 years. We moved back to Salt Lake City, and I got into junior high school. And one of the first classes that I signed up for was a metal shop class. And it was really interesting because I had worked and lived in a historic village. I saw things as a child that were made from metal. And I had an understanding and a desire to create things just like I saw in this historic community. So when the workshop assignments were given to make a flower cup or a dustpan, I had a different idea. I wanted to make historical light fixtures. I wanted to make candle lanterns. And quickly, my teacher saw that I had an interest in metal. And it was with that interest in metal that led me on a path, again crossing a red thread. My father in Salt Lake City, hang on just a second. My father in Salt Lake City came back, started an independent practice as an architect, restoring historical buildings, specifically Mormon architecture. And one day he got a phone call. And they said, "We have a building in Salt Lake City that we think you need to take a look at. We've heard that it's cast iron, but we know nothing of its kind. Can you come and take a look?" So my father went and investigated the building. And as a result of that experience, my brothers and I were able to take the skills that we learned in high school and help my father restore this cast iron facade. Now, a family is an amazing thing, and families in our community are very powerful and very important. We believe in family, and we work together. My brothers and I, one brother, my oldest brother, was a master model maker. And when my father got involved in this restoration, we started that restoration in our family garage. Another brother wanted to study architecture, and he worked with my dad in his architectural firm for 10 years. He actually ran the firm as an architect. And I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But I had a passion for metal. I did an apprenticeship as a goldsmith. And I loved to make jewelry. But when this opportunity came to work on this cast iron building, the future changed, and again, another red thread crossed. This was a picture of my father working on this historical village and one of his partners. What an amazing experience and what an amazing leveling ground this opportunity provided for us to develop a passion to work with our hands. So this is ZCMI, and now I'm going to play a movie. It's about 27 minutes, but you're going to get some insights into what this building did for our family, but also the red thread that it created to link us to metalwork across America.
What does it mean to save an important architectural icon like the facade of ZCMI? We live in a throwaway society, so we think, we're tired of that, it's old, let's throw it away. And of course it was cast in cast iron, which it rusts away and deteriorates, and why should we save it?
The cast iron facade is the essence of the ZCMI building. What happens behind the facade can come and go. The old building can be torn down, a new one can be put in its place, but the cast iron facade, that's what you keep.
If we can save some of those art treasures of our short past and let that continue to influence how we think and how we create things today, I think that's a good thing.
People love this type of architecture. These buildings remind people of their childhood and the good old days and the memories that they had growing up in Salt Lake City, being around ZCMIs when they were children, going shopping there with their parents and their grandparents.
I have a friend, Joanne Copeland, who loves ZCMI. When I said, well, I don't know if they're going to put the facade back up again, she said they've got to put the facade back up again because it's a part of our lives and it's a part of our heritage.
Great works of art really are immortal. They go from one generation to the next and they live on and help us appreciate what has come before and inspires and uplifts. That's really the purpose of art, isn't it? To inspire and uplift and to present something that will show people of their possibilities and motivate them to want to do better. And I think we need, especially in today's world, we need more and more of that.
ZCMI got started in the winter of 1868, 1869. One of the concerns the Mormon people had under their leader Brigham Young was that people were bringing in products into the territory for sale and really jacking the prices up. Brigham Young said, why don't we become our own merchants? And so they started Zion's Cooperative Mercantile Institution.
CCMI, when it was first conceived and organized, was really a network of cooperatives that existed all throughout the Great Basin Kingdom. And it was a great equalizer. It made it possible for a family down in Santaquin, Utah, to have the same quality of state's goods that were shipped in from across the country as someone who lived in Salt Lake City. And Brigham Young, when he talked about that, he talked about CCMI as the people's store because it united the LDS community and gave this equal access to wonderful things.
ZCMI had the respect and the love of the whole community. It was their store. It was their ZCMI. You didn't just like ZCMI. You loved it. It was a part of your heart.
And they sold everything from overalls to produce to wagons to buttons and fabric. It really was America's first department store.
I think we can, with certainty, claim that CCMI was America's first department store because of the way it was organized. When Brigham Young met with a group of some of the most prominent owners of businesses in town, and they decided that they would join together and create this sort of collective enterprise, they were essentially bringing a series of departments into this new organization. And it was earlier than the earliest department stores.
ZCMI was right when they said it's an institution, because ZCMI was definitely an institution. one that built character, honesty, and integrity. You couldn't separate the church from the business. It was the greatest formula that ever happened. There's thousands of stories about ZCMI because there's been thousands of different wonderful experiences that have been had by just the common, ordinary person.
The generation that built that and got it up and running was a group that did the very best they could with what they had. They brought cast iron, which was really an unknown process, to Salt Lake in 1869.
People would come from all over just to look at the windows.
The cast iron process began in New York with the Bogardus building. It was a kind of an erector set type of process. Up to that time, buildings, the structure was heavy timber, maybe 4 or 5 stories at the most, and brick or stone bearing walls.
Bogardus was the pioneer of cast iron architecture in the sense of multi-story, particularly commercial buildings, the ones that spread across the United States. The architecture that was in a way invented just at the right moment when the United States was expanding and was spreading west. It was an invention whose time had come.
And soon cast iron buildings were popping up all over. After the Civil War, you could send cast iron components on a train all the way to Salt Lake City, and that's what happened.
When I heard that they were going to tear down ZCMI, we didn't believe it. The first department store in the world is going to close down now? I mean, no, that somebody's got it wrong. I don't know who's telling that story, but it's not a true story. It was a feeling of devastation.
Normally, a new piece of construction comes along and the architects want to throw all the old away and put their statement in. But somehow they decided to build a new building, but save the old original facade.
In 1971, when the decision was made to build the new mall, the decision was also made to demolish the ZCMI building wholly. Well, Utah Heritage Foundation and the other partners who wanted to preserve this important place got together and said, what can we do to save it?
You know, a lot of people really can't pencil the value to restoration and just think it's cheaper, more economical to tear down and build from new. And my experience has been that it's a hard argument to make because once something's gone, it's gone. And people don't remember what they've lost.
An advisory member for Utah Heritage Foundation decided that he would write a letter to the editor of the Salt Lake Tribune and advise people that the only effective course of action at this point to save the facade would be to cancel your charge accounts at ZCMI if they were going to demolish the facade. Well, that's what happened. A flood of letters came in, many of them with cut-up credit cards. So people speaking with their wallet really made the difference in saving the facade.
It's like any decision you have to make in terms of curating what stands the test of time, whether it's a good song or a musical or a movie or a book. Somebody has to be looking out for the architectural integrity of our human journey. And so standing up for that, I think, requires people who understand history, who understand architecture, who understand design, but also understand what's happened in those buildings, you know, the stories. Because I'm a big believer that you're always standing on somebody else's shoulders. You're always building on, you know, the greatness of somebody else. And that's certainly true for buildings and great homes.
I first heard about GSMT when my mother said, I'm going to Salt Lake City. She said, I'm going to Salt Lake City because there is an important cast iron building in that place, built back in 1869 by the Mormons who erected it as a commercial establishment. She'd heard about an architect who was working to restore this building in a way that is in keeping with its historical character. The man that she was talking about was Stephen Baird, and I know that she several times visited Salt Lake City. I think that they both saw themselves as early pioneers in this process of finding a practical way to restore cast iron buildings.
My father was trying to discover how this type of building assembly was put together. And so we very carefully took pieces apart and cleaned them up using paint stripper and wire brushes until we could figure out how to put them back together again.
Those columns were all done in little tiny pieces and bolted together. So he had to take the paint off, I don't know how many layers, 14 layers of paint had to be taken off so that he could get down to the bolts and find out how the thing was put together.
This was the answer to how you could preserve cast iron buildings at a time when the purpose for which they were originally built had passed. And I gather that Stephen Baird really had to work step by step and solve problems as he went along.
When I think of my dad, I think of an amazing artist. He had this amazing creative ability to find out about a project and then figure out how it worked and then translate that into drawings, but also inspire all of the craftsmen and all of the workmen surrounding that project to work at their highest level. His commitment was to creating a project that in the end would be the best that it could be.
He was an eternal optimist. If he didn't know it, he would find out how to do it. He knew where he wanted to go and what it wanted to be like, and he would find his way to that goal somehow.
And it was really on a shoestring budget. We were just working out of our family garage. When we had inspections from various people, my dad would go out and rent a building for a day, hang the sign on the front of it, and then I would take all the little bits of equipment that I had down there, my drill press and hand tools, and spread them out to make them look like I'd worked a long time in that shop. As they finished their inspection, I would clear up the tools, take the sign off the building, go back to our family garage.
It was such a rinky-dinky outfit. The main tool they had was a Kirby vacuum cleaner that the boy's mother had bought, thinking that it was going to be used vacuuming the house. It was one of those whiz-bang concoctions. It had a paint sprayer attachment. It had a Dremel tool, a flexible head, so you could attach disc sanders and all manner of grinders.
They reconditioned every part. In fact, I think they recast most of the parts and then applied it to this new building. And I thought the end result was just really terrific.
It is actually one of the most significant buildings in America in the story of preserving and restoring architectural cast iron.
I think that the CCMI building is almost like Bogardus building his first cast iron building, the Millau Pharmacy. It proved that one could do this. It proved that you could take it apart, clean it up, improve it, recast places, and re-erect a building.
The ZCMI facade influenced restoration in the United States of America, clear across the country. Buildings have been restored because of what my father discovered.
When I heard of this new construction going in again, I thought, well, here goes ZCMI's old facade.
I was quite alarmed when I visited Salt Lake City to see ZCMI wasn't there anymore. And I called up Robert. I said, Robert, where did ZCMI go? I know it was your first big project. And he said, never fear, it's been carefully disassembled and will be rebuilt as part of a new development.
The ZCMI's facade, or the new Macy's facade now, is a cast iron facade that consists of about 63 bays, which initially were window openings and entrance openings. And the structure is a series of colonnades that have arched heads and pediments where windows were enclosed in each of those openings.
My mother, she would have, I think, appreciated it immensely because it does what she so liked to do. Find a good, practical way, a way to use something and then use all of the advantages we have of modern techniques and abilities and find a way to save things by making them useful.
Brigham Young was particularly infatuated with British architecture. I can't help but think as I look at those lions on the facade that this is a little bit of Great Britain that Brigham is bringing with him. It was a way of saying, we're here to stay. And this institution is going to be around a while. Good architecture is one way of saying permanence. And the cast iron facade of ZCMI has become a statement of the permanence of a vital downtown core in one of America's significant cities.
I think Brigham Young, first of all, conceptualized Salt Lake City as this sort of cooperative environment, a community. But very quickly, and within just 4 or 5 years, he started thinking about what you might call the genteel city, or a city that really met the cultural standard of other cities. And I think in that era, mid-19th century, one of the cultural icons of a great American city was the cast iron facade. And I think that was really part of his design of building a city that was more comparable to cities elsewhere.
I think that, in a nutshell, shows the importance that people attach to cast iron, that it's worthwhile for a developer to carefully disassemble a cast iron facade, put it aside, restore it, and re-erect it, because it is a non-reproducible architectural resource.
The facade initially is constructed of thousands of components that are assembled in little pieces that make a large part, like a column, or with column capitals that may have 20 or 30 pieces. And so we at Historical Art spend a great deal of time in removing old finishes that were on the facade, the old fillers, get the material down to a bare metal where we will repair the component, then put new finishes on that have a greater longevity.
Gradually, historic arts and castings was brought together so that these craftsmen and these artists could come together and make these bits and pieces. And the bits and pieces became rather large bits and rather large pieces.
My father has really left a legacy in downtown Salt Lake. His commitment to historical preservation is here. It's present here. And those things are available for generations to enjoy and participate in. As one of his sons, it brings great pleasure to be able to work on this project, something that he was inspired about in his career early on that has actually been passed through our family to my brothers and I. The joy to be able to, to work on something that my dad did and to be able to make it have a longer life and, to really be better than it was initially is really special to us. And we hope that that legacy will not only pass to our families, but will also pass to our employees and their families and the people in the community as well.
I think this project's been really special to me, and for several reasons, but the most important is for my family and for my children and their children, for them to have something that they can look back and say, Grandpa had a part of this, Grandpa was down here working on this building. I think it will add extra value to them particularly, but really to everyone that's worked on this project, I think it's going to be the same.
Cast iron is just so big and expensive. I don't expect to see anybody building new cast iron buildings in America anytime soon, which makes the stock of cast iron buildings that we have an especially precious resource.
And it's timeless. It'll never grow old or out of style. So that's what the GSMT facade says to me.
It rewards you for looking. So the closer you walk to it, and the more closely you look at it, the more it visually rewards you.
When we saw what they had done with it, it was almost like a miracle. They made something old, beautiful, turn into something new and elegant.
I was so stunned because I wasn't expecting it, and so awestruck by its beauty that I actually just stopped in my tracks and started to cry. I thought it was just such an astonishing sight to behold, and it just was so beautiful, and you could tell even from diagonally a block across from it, the kind of care and craftsmanship that went into the restoration. And I think I cried because I just felt like we made the right decision, the community made the right decision, and that block was really going to come back to not to its old glory, but to a new glory.
You have this wonderful sense of historical continuity and this wonderful sense of visual celebration of ornamentation of detail. In a sense, the GSMT cast iron facade is like a wonderful painting. that while our walls may change, our house may change, you save the painting and you keep using it because it has meaning to you.
So the red thread continues. There's something that happens in a family or a person's life when they get connected to their past. John Wiart was just sharing with me the experience that he's having right now, restoring his father's workshop in France. What an amazing opportunity. What a great thing for your family. The legacy that he started, that you have built, and that you're leaving for the future will change lives. Every one of us have red threads in our lives. There's something important about taking time and focusing on craft, using our hands, working in the spirit of collaboration. This facade on the ZCMI building would have never happened without the collaboration of many people who were interested in making sure that this building was not torn down. It took the insight of somebody to write a letter to the newspaper. There have been several red threads in my life as I have gone through a career. This is one of the great ones. Margot Gale, who was here in New York City, an amazing woman who single-handedly preserved most of your historic districts, a woman that should be celebrated, that there should be a monument for, that should be recognized and acknowledged because you have the Ladies' Mile, you have the Flatiron District, you have Broadway, you have Soho. It was because of this woman's mother, Margot Gale, who single-handedly started a conversation that would change New York City. The red thread in my life was that I had the opportunity to spend 10 years visiting Margot in New York City, learning from her, learning about her passion. And then I had the opportunity to meet her daughter, who's a history professor out in Illinois. See, families are important. We have the opportunity to leave with our family a legacy. I want to share with you quickly another red thread. A year and a half ago, I was in New York City. I had received a phone call from a gentleman who said, I have a historic chandelier on Park Avenue, and I'd like to restore it. And I happened to be here with my wife. I was actually coming to go to the antique show at the Armory building. And I was in 2 Park Avenue. I looked at these historic chandeliers. They were gorgeous. They were glass, cast glass. And they were in a terrible state of disrepair. And as I left, I wondered, what was their history? Where did it come from? How did they end up in this building? All I could find out from the building owner was that the building had acquired the lights in 1967 that they had somehow come from a building in Toronto. That weekend, my wife and I enjoyed the antique show at the Armory building. It was amazing. And as I was walking through the building, I happened to walk in a French antique dealer's studio. And as I was looking at the furniture, because I'm passionate about mid-century French furniture and mid-century French metalwork, I saw on the wall a wall sconce. And somehow it was vaguely familiar to me. For some reason, the pattern in the glass I had seen before. It was the glass that were on these chandeliers. So I inquired of the antique dealer. I said, "Where did those wall sconces come from?" And she said, "Well, they came from a project in Toronto. We've had them in storage for 50 years. And I said, "Do you have any information about those wall sconces?" And she said, "Oh, yes, I do." And she pulled out a beautiful cut sheet with an image of the light fixture and the price tag, $50,000. And I thought, holy cow. But as I flipped the page over, I saw these chandeliers hanging in a store in the Stewart department store in Toronto, Canada. They were in a restaurant that seated 1,000 people. And with that little piece of information, I was able to determine the history and the provenance of these chandeliers. They were made by Sabino in France in 1920, a famous glass artist, a contemporary of Lalique. On Monday, I went back and I told the owners all about their fixtures. It was the red thread that connected me to those fixtures. We recently finished the chandeliers. But another red thread was connected because I had the opportunity to bring my sons to New York City and work with me to help me take down these chandeliers. They were taken to Salt Lake. They were restored in our facility. And just before Christmas, we had the opportunity to reinstall these magnificent fixtures with both of my boys who are studying here in New York City. The red thread is real. I have a son who is studying at the Beaux-Arts Atelier. His passion is design after the order of the École des Beaux-Arts. Over 50 years earlier, my father collected a portfolio with images from a student just like my son, who has an opportunity to take that same education and learning, the only education in the United States that teaches that type of training. We have students here in New York City that are learning that way. I want them to stand up because these guys are amazing. Come on, guys. I recently had the opportunity to bring these students to Salt Lake City to a conference. And I actually got to watch them work. I got to watch them draw. Now, they learn in a different way than in a traditional school. But it's in a way that coordinates hand and eye, learning principles of design that have been around for thousands of years, that allow the basics to decorate and ornament buildings that have permanence. It's the only program like this in the United States. Well, just before Christmas, my boys met me over at 2 Park Avenue, and we installed a couple of beautiful fixtures. Now, if you want an amazing experience, go to 2 Park Avenue. Walk into that lobby and look at those fixtures, like new, in place because of a red thread. So, I've had a career of almost 40 years. I've worked on buildings all over the United States. I love working with my hands. There are three things that I've come to discover about getting an education and about a man's life. First of all, we learn. We have to learn. We can learn in school, or we can learn by experience. I know John finished, I think completed an apprenticeship in France as a metalsmith. We have no real formal apprenticeship program in the United States. But first we have to learn, just like these students are doing in the BAA. Second, we get an opportunity to do. We get to take what we learn and we get to execute it. We get to do. Now, I've had 30 years of working with my hands, traveling around the world. I'll share another quick story of a red thread. I was talking to John, and he said that some of his people were in Singapore. 15 years ago, I republished a book called the McFarland Catalog. The McFarland Catalog was published by the largest manufacturer of decorative cast iron in the world, in Glasgow, Scotland. When I went to Singapore, I was asked to go look at the presidential palace. And as I looked at the palace, I discovered quickly that it was built, the metalwork was built by British masters. I happened to have a copy of the McFarland Catalog with me because I was visiting some other people. We were working on a hotel, and they were looking for ornamental metalwork. As I opened the catalog, the entry gate for the presidential palace was in the catalog. The red thread, is it real? Does it exist? I believe it does. And I believe that if we follow our hearts and if we follow our passions, the red thread will connect us to places and things and experiences that we would not have otherwise. So, after I finished the film on ZCMI, it was a glorious year for us. And by the way, that Kirby vacuum, my mother is still using it. It was in her closet. When we were making the film, I said, "Mom, what happened to the Kirby vacuum?" She goes, "Oh, Rob, it's right here." I mean, if we built vacuums today like they built them back in 1973, we'd be in a better place. But the red thread, again, is real. We were able to premiere this documentary in an IMAX theater in Salt Lake City. It was a really special experience because this IMAX theater, they only show religious films. But we were given permission to show this documentary that had significance to downtown Salt Lake City. My father, who had an amazing career as an architect, was suffering from Alzheimer's. And he came to the presentation not really aware of what was going on. The audience and the seats were packed. My dad sat in the middle of the audience, and as the film started to play, he sat up in his chair, and he knew that he had touched that facade. It was familiar to him. It was only a week and a half later that my dad passed away, but his story was told. His red thread was complete, but he's left it with me and my brothers and my family. Now, I say this to my sons. You come from an amazing heritage. You have within your blood all it takes to become magnificent in any field. And it doesn't have to be metalwork. It can be anything that you have a passion for. And I would say to every one of you, look for the red threads. Recognize where the connections are, because it is the red thread that ties us all together. I'm so grateful for the opportunity that I've had to share this message with you. Thank you for coming, and I appreciate it.